Welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts with hosts Sandy Feather, Tom Butzler, and Tim Abbey.
Hello, welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast from Penn State Extension for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts. I am one of your hosts, Sandy Feather, filling in for our regular host, Margaret Pickoff. On today's episode, I'll be joined by my green industry team colleagues, Tim Abbey and Tom Butzler as co-hosts. Hi, Tim. Hi, Tom.
Hey,
Sandy.
good afternoon, Sandy.
How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
Not bad.
On today's episode, we'll be joined by Casey Sclar, the H.O. Smith Endowed Director of the Arboretum at Penn State. Before we get to our interview with Casey, we'll start with a quick check-in about what we, your hosts, are seeing or thinking about out in the field at this time of year. I can go with, I'm pretty sure that here in Western Pennsylvania, we've had more snow in March than we had in all of February.
Yeah.
And I've got daffodils and hellebores blooming right now, and our red and silver maples are all budded up. Just hoping that it's supposed to get out in the 20s over the weekend. So we're going to be kissing our magnolias goodbye, I think.
It's definitely slowed down here. We still got shut out of the March snow. We didn't get anything here. But
Okay.
I had, when it was still warm, I actually saw some insects out and about. I saw a couple of yellow jackets.
Interesting.
I was down by the Susquehanna River and saw some stonefly adults were out.
Nice.
But yeah, we've
Nice.
gotten much colder and everything just kind of ground to a halt.
Yeah, looking out the window today, at least it's raining. It's not snow. But we've talked about this the past couple podcasts, the winter meeting season, and that is winding down. But, I am involved with a kind of an interesting winter meeting project. I'm working with Robin Underwood. She's our beekeeping educator for Penn State Extension. And she put together a really interesting series. It's called Beekeeping Around the World. And so we're bringing in beekeepers from around the world and just talking about their production practices and things that they do in their neck of the world. And so like last week, for example, we brought in some Canadian beekeepers, and, it is slightly different up there, even though, it's just right across the border. Next week, we're going to bring in a beekeeper from East Africa. And, they keep bees differently over there. Some of them use logs, and the bees over there are a little more aggressive. So we're going to hear about that. And then we're going to, in the next couple webinars, we're going to go down to Australia. We're going to venture over to Switzerland. I think we're going to go down to South America, I think in Argentina. So that's really kind of cool and it's different. And that's open to folks who want to review some of those recordings in the future.
Nice. That sounds really exciting, Tom.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's bring on our guest for today. Again, Casey Sclar, who is director of the Arboretum at Penn State at University Park. Welcome, Casey, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to see you.
Yeah. You've had a long career at public gardens like Longwood, and then as director of the American Public Gardens Association. What attracted you to the Arboretum at Penn State?
Oh, man, I can go on and on how
Please
happy
do.
I am to be here. It was really just the perfect fit for me. So I grew up a landscaper. That's my origins, and I grew up doing grounds management. I was lucky enough when I was at a very young age to get a job, two jobs that were very influential for me. One was a landscaping job with the guy who invented the tensiometer, the device that measures soil moisture. And then also to get a job at the public garden, in this case, Lotus Land, which is a garden out in Santa Barbara that I was enjoying hopping over the walls on late Friday nights and Saturday nights and running around in to exercise my horticultural gene. All that is to say that, a lot of those same things attracted me after a career in landscaping in different spots in the Central Coast of California and in Oregon. I went back to school to seek more knowledge in horticulture specifically, and then toward the end of that undergraduate experience, I was the person that everybody brought their sick plant to. So that
The plant doctor. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. The plant doctor. And I loved it. I loved that aspect of that diagnostic aspect of it. And so I could have gone anywhere. I could have kind of focused in weed science at the time, or plant pathology or entomology at the time. Chose entomology and went and did my master's and PhD at Colorado State in entomology, primarily working with vegetables and ornamental plants at the time. And so it was a really great experience, and also got some diagnostic experience in. Anyway, to make a long story short, once I was done with my PhD degree there, I went to work for Longwood Gardens, and at that time happened to Longwood Gardens, and this is now back when, you know, dinosaurs roamed the earth, if we were going to look back on the clock. But all that is to say, within my first couple of days of being at Longwood, there were several cooperative extension agents at the time from Pennsylvania who were very instrumental and were among the first people that I met. One of them is David Shashanek, who is no longer with us, but is, you know, hopefully a legend in cooperative extension that he was. And we just really hit it off. We helped form the Pendel IPM research group that for many years provided amazing growing degree day and plant phenological data, which is something that still is near and dear to me now that I'm here. But all that is to say, you know, what led me to the job here is that it's our wedding, Penn State's wedding and my wedding, involves something old. Like I just talked to you about my cooperative extension background, and I was on the adjunct faculty here way back when in entomology. I'm back again as an affiliate professor. So that's all the something old. And there's a something new, which is that Penn State's Arboretum, the Arboretum at Penn State, reports to Penn State Outreach, which has an amazing capacity to communicate messages and to make the world a better place for the citizens of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And then there's something borrowed, which is sort of all these random things that I do, the jack of all trades and masters of, you know, yet master of none, of, you know, everything from composting to running large meetings and conferences through and professional education through my work with the American Public Gardens Association, just everything. So that's all the something borrowed. And then there's something blue and white. So there you have it. But also in saying that, so the pollinator and bird garden that exists at the Arboretum at Penn State was a huge draw. Part of my service work is working with a pollinator conservation organization called the Xerces Society. So that piece and the ability to work with great people in the Center for Pollinator Research was an immediate draw. The ability and the growth of the Arboretum to have added things like a children's garden, and then, the amazing natural areas in our prairie, and just that resource that's here that a lot of people know about but don't necessarily come up and see, and then a lot of people do. So the Arboretum is one of the 4 most visited places in Center County, and we get, conservatively speaking, 150,000 visitors a year, although I can tell you that in 8 months we actually get a lot more. We're just lacking the capability to measure it accurately. It's just a huge treasure. It's a huge treasure botanically. It's a huge treasure horticulturally. It's a living library of plants, all of which kind of caters to my background. And it's a fusion of art, science, and business of horticulture. That's just a great resource. So, yeah, it was just perfect fit.
When Sandy was doing the introduction, she had mentioned public gardens, and then you had mentioned that also. What is a public garden compared to a private garden?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot, right? And so one of the answers to that is that a private garden is there for limited enjoyment, right? It's there for enjoyment of who the owner of that facility wants to come or doesn't want to come. And when you talk about what a public garden is sort of the opposite of that, in that it's a resource of plant material that really is open and accessible at many, many different points in time throughout the year. So that's one big determinant factor. The other determinant factor that I think that defines a public gardener and arboreta is the fact that the living library of plants, or the living museum of plants, the conservation and genetic resource of plants, is taken very seriously. So we have 4,500 different accessions of plants. We're every much a bit a curated collection that our new siblings, the Palmer Museum of Art, that's moving to the Arboretum, currently is. Right. So we have all these plants. About 1 out of every 6 of those plants has been involved in a research project. And that research project could be involved in molecular work, or it could be involved in some other aspect of superior performance or trait work to help improve. So the Arboretum is really a manifestation of Penn State's 21st century mission to provide outstanding teaching, outstanding research, and outstanding service resources for us. So kind of in closing that up and saying, what's a public gardener? What's the Arboreta to us? I can say that for us as a team, we're looking at 2 strategic goals for this year. One is growing our capacity, and the other is being more welcoming. We want to be there for everyone who needs us in different ways, and that's varied, right? And so one of my archetypes that I think about a lot is a freshman student who's new to Penn State, who maybe grew up in the New York City area or another highly urbanized area and lived in a high-rise apartment building, and they're now in the East dorms or in some of the dorms that are close. They've never really understood what a natural area is, and now the Hartley Woods and the Prairie is literally, a 10 to 15 minute walk from their house, and they're surrounded in nature. And not to feel threatened by that, but to engage with that and understand the important thing that it is, and to be there as a mental health resource for them too. That's kind of it in a nutshell, and describing the difference that I see between the two.
In your position, are you allowed, or do you get the chance to teach on campus?
Yeah, I have that option to teach on campus, and I'm new to Penn State, or new back to Penn State in that sense. As an affiliate professor, I can teach. I have done some lectures, but I can start to form formal curricula. Same thing applies for research. I'm currently investigating different research ideas that are my ideas. And so, well, I should say, I think our ideas, that really benefit all of us at Penn State.
I'm sure you have your hands full right now, just, as you're transitioning into this still sort of new job as, director of the Arboretum. That's really great though, because you have a wealth of information to share with people from your different experiences. So that's good. Yeah.
Again, a fancy way of saying, jack of all trades, master of none. I have, my PhD degree was in spider mites. My master's degree was with neonicotinoid chemicals when they were a numbered compound, and learning how they express themselves in ornamental plants and trialing them for different uses. And that stuff comes back around all the time. So one thing that might be interesting to landscape professionals is there's a USDA grant on boxwood blight. That's a pretty large USDA grant that investigates boxwood blight as a holistic phenomenon. And so, we know a lot about boxwood from that. The outreach part of that is called the Boxwood Blight Insight Group, and anybody can go and join. It's essentially a monthly newsletter that comes out, but I'm thrilled to work with a whole bunch of professionals who are working on different aspects of solving boxwood blight, from looking at the molecular characteristics of the disease to looking at different spray regimes of how to develop effective application methods for it, all the way down to different trials of varieties, and then how we talk about what we're talking about so that landscape professionals get the benefit of all that work as quick as possible. So we just wrapped up our second group meeting. There's about 38 professionals who are either researching or a part of that advisory group out in Oregon. And it was a really interesting way to kind of look at that crop in a little bit more detail, because as landscape professionals, I know it as the job security shrub.
Good way to put it. Yeah.
Right. Right. Because we all take care of it, and it has a host and suite of benefits in the sense that, yes, it's deer resistant, and we find it in a lot of our commercially kept landscapes. But also, subject to a lot of maladies and some management to manage it effectively. So I knew that it was the job security shrub. What I learned is that it's also the bourbon of shrubs, and that, well, it is, Sandy. I mean, it's funny that to describe it that way, but when you think about it, right, it takes about 7 years to go from cutting to saleable number 3 nursery container plant. And there's a lot of emphasis placed on these varieties that are proven for certain landscape characteristics. So when you think that every cutting that's getting stuck by a large landscape nursery in Oregon, they're thinking about the ramifications of the saleability of that plant 7 years down the line. So every cutting they stuck this year was based on expected 2030 expected 2030 sales. And that shows, why they're interested in some varieties, not necessarily as interested in other varieties. It goes into how they keep their stock clean, and all that is to say, boxwood is conservatively estimated at $130 million a year crop. Wow. So it's not insignificant.
So Casey, I'm a beer drinker, so beg my ignorance here. So the reference to bourbon, does it take 7 years to make bourbon? Is that what that reference is to?
It can, yeah. It can take a long time to make bourbon, and some people put it in a barrel and float it out around the ocean. Some people have different, and a bourbon that's finished in 1 year, yeah. And of course, all of these things that we just talked about, right? They're all related to botany and horticulture too.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Got it. What kind of barrels do we age bourbon in?
That's right. We age them in oak barrels. Yeah,
white oak,
that's right.
Specifically. Yeah.
Well, Sandy, I've seen it aged in other things too, but yeah.
And speaking of boxwood, there's a new pest knocking on our door, that boxwood tree moth caterpillar. Apparently they've discovered that, it was first found in Ontario, but then now some of the stuff got accidentally shipped to New York, and I think they feel like they got that under control. But there's a little established population, a couple places in Michigan now.
Yep. Yeah, and you're absolutely right on that. And this group is aware of the significance of that other introduced pest, because of course, boxwood blight is an introduced disease, and right. Our colleagues at Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture have taken what I think is a very appropriate stance on being really stringent about the shipment of material from outside Pennsylvania, and really deeply inspecting it and making sure that it's really quality and coming from, in this case, certified sources, so that we're using it in our landscape. And all you have to do is look at, public horticulture specifically, right? So we do some work where we're advancing the awareness of public gardens throughout Pennsylvania and Harrisburg. And, these estates have unbelievably valuable collections of boxwood that's significant. It's also the oldest cultivated shrub. So, right. So when you look at all these historic pictures of monasteries or churches, and you look at that big green blob that's down at the base, it's generally boxwood. So I had no idea that we'd talk as much about boxwood. I'm prepared to shift off to another topic.
So, Casey, the three of us work with the green industry professionals on a pretty regular basis. And one of the top things or concerns that rises to the top with this group is labor. And it's tough to get young adults, young people interested in plants and horticulture. So what are public gardens, or specifically the Penn State Arboretum, doing to attract younger students? You talked about the college students and the way, to get them over in class work, coursework, and so forth. But what do you do to get the younger generation interested in plants?
Oh, man, that's a great question. These are just a ton of softballs for me today. So the short answer is currently not enough, in my opinion. The long answer is there are several different things that I think the Arboretum's uniquely positioned to do, and that public gardens are well positioned to do, and that Penn State is well positioned to do. So, at the Arboretum, we're a gateway for the community, not just for, the 100,000 people that work just on the other side of Park Avenue and our students, right? So we have all those faculty, all that resource, all that university resource. But when we talk about it being one of the foremost visited places in Center County, and the only free one, we're also there for all the folks in the community to come and bring their families to come or come from out of town. So the children's garden at the Arboretum is a fantastic place that's there for youth to explore all their different senses. We hold different drop-in classes throughout the year that are on everything from having tasting events for kids so they can develop a connection with food, to different aspects of nature-based play and exploration and discovery. So we're kind of engaging youth in that fashion. And back when I was with the American Public Gardens Association, we also created a program called Plant Heroes, which started as, ironically dovetailing to the last question, a place where K through 5 audiences could learn about invasive pests and diseases in a new and novel way that was in multiple languages, but then also has extended into different principles and practices of forest health and forest ecology. So we're kind of making that connection early on, but then traditionally a lot of public gardens lose students when they get to be in the middle school age. And I experienced this firsthand when I used to go to career day events for my son, and I would bring what I thought was a fantastic portfolio of great things for Longwood Gardens. And everybody would say, "Oh yeah, but the guy from Microsoft gave us a flash drive."
Oh God!
Being humorous, we found out through a group that I'm on the advisory board of called Seed Your Future, which is seedyourfuture.org, which is an organization that's really dedicated toward promoting careers in the plant sciences and the wealth of careers and the wealthy careers that are in the plant sciences. It's a great initiative and a great organization. And, they did focus groups, and, you could probably guess that the percentage was going to be low, but, in middle school focus groups, 0% of middle school students knew what horticulture was.
Wow.
And so going out and trying to reach people from where they are, to where our youth are and our upwardly mobile and engaged communities are, and begin to build that appreciation and the value of the trade craft that is horticulture, is a real need, and it's something that we're working on consecutively. And then we get to, sorry, go ahead, Sandy.
There was, I can remember an infographic, and the title was "Plants Do That." Is that part of that initiative?
No, actually, the Plants Do That initiative is sort of the next leg in the stool, which is from, and I'm actually looking at it right now, it's from an organization called Niche. And Niche is the National Initiative of Consumer Horticulture. And we helped form that to really raise broader awareness of end-use horticulture in totality, which is in and of itself a $200 billion a year, 2 million job a year industry. 99% of the agriculture that everyone sees every day is horticulture that surrounds you. It's the horticulture that is in our offices and plants. It's the horticulture that's outside in our landscapes. And so it's a specialty crop agriculture. So that's where that initiative is. So Seed Your Future is sort of a related initiative to that. Then we talk about what are we really doing and where is Penn State positioned to build the next generation of skilled professional horticulturists in all these different areas. And that's one of the things that, for me, as someone who grew up as a landscaper, I think we have an amazing capacity to be able to do at Penn State. And we have a good landscape contracting program here that's at main campus. but we're not really doing as much as we probably could do at the Commonwealth campuses. And it's something that we all in Extension know that happens, that we're getting the results of any recruitment efforts in our meetings that happen in the wintertime, and we're seeing who's going to be gravitating to these places. But we need to do a better job of, particularly in urban areas, bringing more horticulturists into the trade and encouraging them, compensating them, and giving them the tools that they need to move along. And I feel like the Arboretum can have a really huge role in that. And public gardens also can have a really big role in that, not just through the internships and things like Longwood's Professional Gardener Training Program, or the Chanticleer internship programs that are there, but really in engaging with teachers and professionals at the Commonwealth campuses, because many of our professors at the Commonwealth campuses are people who have active research programs, but don't necessarily have the direct impacts that they would require to be able to do it, as well as different folks here in main campus. So when we're doing research here at the Arboretum, we have collaborations with almost every college. And so tying that in, I think, is really important in understanding what it takes to be very skilled and successful as a horticulturist. So some of it is, a lot of what I do is in administration and business practices. It's in budget setting, it's in goal setting. So it is a business, but it's also a science. And as we know, it's also in many cases an art, and making it pleasing and making those and then practicing the principles of ecology.
I got a question, since you kind of came back to focus on the Arboretum itself. These are sort of, it's a two-part question. One, is there room there for you to expand like the plant collection? And the second part would be, along with yourself, do you have a committee that is involved with like the focus of the Arboretum going forward? Like, okay, we want to, add these plants, or we want to focus on something like that. I mean, who provides input?
Yeah. So the answer to your question is yes and yes. So the ability to expand is definitely there, and the answer, but the other part of it is, but how and where we expand and why we expand. So as part of the Arboretum's inception, we have different areas that are thoughtfully planted for different purposes. We have the children's garden, which is planted for a purpose. We have the strolling garden, which is planted for a purpose. And then we have the pollinator and bird garden, which really is an amazing resource in that, we're having research, demonstration, and other things. And so now, as I talk to different researchers in different colleges, and they're saying, hey, we have this research program, we'd like to do this at the Arboretum, I'm having conversations with them and saying, terrific. And what is our budget for making that happen that's in your grant? Because the Arboretum currently exists on contributed income from the university. Scratch that. The Arboretum exists on contributed income. About 98% of it comes from donations from folks like you. So the pollinator and bird garden was created through 500 different contributors who all said that's a priority for the Arboretum next. And those 500 plus individuals all gave to make that happen and help us meet our target. So those endowments fund my position, they fund our staff team position, they fund our commitment to being more welcoming. What we should be doing also is engaging dynamically in research and making sure that, so that's why when people say, well, why do you charge for events?
We got to make money somewhere.
We don't have, in order for us to grow, to fulfill our goals and really help serve the university better, we need to grow in that capacity. So we certainly can, but we're also growing programmatically with having, I have amazing team members that I work with who are part of the Arboretum's team, amazing horticulturists that I work with and partner at the Office of Physical Plant who are fantastic and highly skilled individuals in what they do. and so great people to work with. So the question is, if we want to add now, what is it that we need, and what is it that we want to add, and where do we not want to add? So when I was asked by my boss, it's like, why are you here? I said two things. I said, I want to make the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania a better place for all the citizens of Pennsylvania, and especially for the trade craft of landscape horticulture and growing the next generation of horticulturists. And then I do believe that a part of our capital expansion in the future should be a space, a conservatory space that has the best of what Penn State's teaching, research, and services on display every day of the year. When I look across today, which is a perfect indication, it's clocking maybe about 40 degrees here in State College. It's been really rainy. We've maybe had about, and it's just not a nice day. But that doesn't mean that someone's need for education or need for mental health and well-being isn't there. And so that's where we are heading. But in where we are today, we also know that exercise, we don't want to build the next Longwood Conservatory, but we do want to build a space that's a solid space here in the center of Pennsylvania for people to appreciate all that we have to offer in Penn State's ag science.
So going back
So
to
go ahead, Tim.
Your IPM background, do you have people on staff who do scouting of the Arboretum? Like, how do you handle your pest management there, particularly since you have a lot of the general public coming through at any time of the day, which might make spray treatments a little bit challenging?
Yeah. So, I am an IPM person, as Tim mentioned. That's in my blood and in my background. So, when we're employing a vast suite of IPM skills, our Office of Physical Plant folks are scouting and monitoring. Our horticulturists are trained to do that. They're trained to train others to do that as well. So our interns that come on throughout the year are scouting. And then as we're thinking about what to do, part of the benefit of the Arboretum not being that old in the standards of public gardens and arboreta. So, yes, in the Hartley Woods, there are trees that are 300-400 years old that have been there. The Arboretum's history obviously goes back to this area's use by indigenous cultures in being a central gathering place. And then there's a strong history that's there and remains there to this day as the influence of those indigenous cultures. And then we get to where our more modern day history with furnaces and timber production, and how the Arboretum came to be with Mr. Hartley and the Hartley Woods and the purchase of that property, and then it gravitating into the Mitchell tract, which then is what made the initial gift to the Arboretum, which is 370 acres. And so we have chestnut plot space that's in the back. That is part of the American Chestnut Foundation research areas. We have some other capability to do some more research trial areas. And I may have gotten off track there, but to say that we're obviously looking at IPM from a very holistic perspective. And sometimes the fact that the planted botanic gardens, which were 20 years ago a cornfield, and then we had the Hosler oak, which is the witness tree. Sometimes the answer is, wow, that boxwood doesn't really look too good. Let's take it out and let's replace it with something else, because we're not going to be able to hold it to that high standard. And maybe something else deserves something that's sustainable, adaptable, preferably, but not always native varietal plant or native species of plant is the answer there. And sometimes it's there as a really formal aesthetic purpose to achieve a goal. And we have examples of all those different standards of horticultural maintenance there. So sometimes that does mean that we need to do limited chemical treatment of plants, but we obviously can't do that in a manner that interferes with the pollinator and bird garden.
Right. And that kind of makes me think, you mentioned about early on working with the neonicotinoid products when they were numbered compounds. As we come full circle and we have a number of those products on the market, I hear noises about potentially some of them going away because of their impact on pollinators.
Yeah. And I think that's all about applying the principles of integrated pest management in the right way, and where none of us would want to see pesticides gravitate to. And when we, if we were meeting 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we'd be talking about the fate of organophosphate and carbamate products, right? And if we were meeting 40 plus years ago or 50 years ago, we'd be talking about the fate of chlorinated hydrocarbons, about DDT, and be in the area of Rachel Carson, who was Rachel Carson is a Pennsylvania native.
Right.
I live right down the street from where she grew up.
Yeah. Right? So we have this wonderful history with evaluating that. So I've always operated on the principle of treating every single pesticide that you use as if it was the most toxic, both to the applicator and to the ecosystem. So the environmental fate of those products, we often think about the acute effects of those, meaning what happens within that first year after application. But, we had seen through my master's work, but then also through different trials we conducted at Longwood, 3 to 4 years of persistence from a single application of imidacloprid in a plant, and that's wonderful because you're getting protection from certain pests, but it's also a little bit concerning because you had all that exposure to non-targets during that period of time. Not to mention untoward effects, like all of a sudden no predators for spider mites, so they can come in, and you see that a lot with those products usage in hemlocks and other plants. So there's great research out there for that. So all that is to say, as we're looking at these different products, now we have to say, okay, where are they acceptable? Where can we control their use? And where do we feel like we may be in a more challenging use pattern with them? The time has said with neonicotinoid products that, relatively speaking, in comparison to other products of yore, they have less, not none, but less human effects that we've been able to see, but they have a host and suite of ecological effects.
Right.
And so if we're going to kill pollinators through their use or occasional misuse, then we're not going to have any food, because 1 out of every 3 bites of food that we get is coming from a pollinator, from a pollinated plant.
Yep.
So, but there are limited windows and areas where they make a lot of sense, and we can control those conditions. So I don't think that any of the people that I've talked to within that entire regulation realm are saying, well, these things, in terms of growing poinsettias in a controlled greenhouse environment for production purposes, that use pattern needs to go away, because you've got pretty limited and controllable exposure.
Right. You're not going to have a lot of pollinators on a poinsettia plant in December.
Yeah. But when you're talking about growing a plant in production like milkweed, just to control milkweed aphid, and then it's going out into a pollinator garden or a monarch garden.
Not a plan.
It becomes a little bit more intuitive, right? And as landscape horticulturists, right, we live right in the middle of that continuum in a very dynamic profession, that just hearing your introduction about beekeeping around the world and other things, we've really come to be aware of and accept the ecosystem service functions of what we do and the importance of them. We're all land stewards. We're just all land stewards of different sizes and pieces of land, regardless of what we do to them.
And it's, one of the things, when we talk about, let's face it, insects in general are the basis of life.
Yeah.
And right now here in Western Pennsylvania, I'm right in Pittsburgh. My office is in downtown Pittsburgh. Spotted lanternfly has hit here with a vengeance, and people are beside themselves. I'm pretty convinced that if they could lay their hands on nuclear weapons to do harm to these insects, they would do that. How do we try to get your average person, maybe not somebody who does what we all do, but your average person to just chill out about insects. They're just terrified of them.
It freaks them out. Yeah, that's for sure.
An arborist was telling me he went to a Pirate game. And I don't know if you know anything about Pittsburgh, Casey, but we are the three rivers in the city of bridges. And so he had parked downtown and walked across one of the bridges to the stadium. And the adult spotted lanternflies were just everywhere. And people were scooping their kids up and putting them on their shoulders because I guess they thought the spotted lanternflies were going to eat their children or whatever. I wish I knew how to get people to calm down because it's only going to get worse here. We're just really getting started with spotted lanternfly.
Yeah, I was back down in Philadelphia with my family in September, and they, in downtown Philly, it was pretty bad there as well. And so, one of the things that I think is the key there is being simple yet innovative with your messaging. So I was surprised that, my kiddos who are older kiddos who are, I have, two that are now enrolled in college. And, but, the fact that there were TikTok videos, that there were other things that, as I'll put myself in the classification, not you all, as old people would never think about using that as an avenue for connecting with people, but that simple message that just step on them.
Yeah.
If it looks like that, step on it, and then see how many that you can step on, and knowing that, you can be a part of saving plants just by doing that.
Make a game of it.
Yep.
Yeah. And yet we can have a really strong and massively heady conversation. And we've gone into some places that I would say are heady conversations, but then you keep it really, 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 really simple, right? We got to also kind of turn it back to, we all got to go have a beer at the end of the day or enjoy a nice meal and a libation with everyone around us. And if we can't talk very simply about what we're doing and keep the message simple, that's what happens with insects. It's the view as a threat, understanding that many people are scared by nature of things with more than two legs. and getting them to
stomp on some spotted lanternflies.
Yeah. As scary as it is, you're never more than 6 feet away from a spider. These just little simple facts of, hey, it's going to be all right, can go a long way. And it's especially challenging because in horticulture, and especially in public horticulture, when we want to interpret everything that we do with quality educational content, we can often go too far, or we feel the need to keep it new when in fact we haven't had distinct message penetration. So, I talked to you all about the Boxwood Blight Insight Group. That may be new information for you all. That may be new information for our landscape tradecraft professionals here in Pennsylvania. Fabulous. We knew that audience was an audience that we may not have been able to reach yet. If you knew about it and you knew about all the webinar resources that are there and all the incredible information that's there as a part of that effort, awesome, we did our job. But if not, it's 3 times 3. You always have to do something 3 times, and then 3 times that you're sick of it and thought that you got the message out before that 9th time that the message started to penetrate.
I'm going to give the homeowners a little break on that spotted lanternfly, Sandy, because if the Burmese python was in my backyard, I'd be a little freaked out. You know what's going on?
I'd be freaked out. Amen. Yep, absolutely.
Just so it probably all comes down to education. Hey, so Casey, when you're dreaming with your committee or planning goals, what is the next garden that we might see? And I know that's contingent upon contributions and how they match and everything. I mean, we looking at a wetland garden maybe in the future, bog gardens, or what are some of the things dreaming up that we might see in the future when we come up to the next football game?
Oh man, that's a great question. Yeah, well, it's not that it's a long list. It's a list that, I want to also say part of our current emphasis right now is in taking the horticultural displays that we have and ensuring that we have all the resources we need to bring them to the highest level of horticultural standards that we have here at Penn State. And that, the horticulturists that I work with are phenomenal and gifted individuals, and they're helping to set the standard for horticulture and the practice of horticulture here at Penn State on a daily basis. Like, this is we're the show, and we know it, and we want to make sure that we're living up to that expectation. So the most immediate new thing that I think people will see is the manifestation of the new Palmer Museum of Art. Yep. And that landscape. We're just about to move into tree and shrub planting on that. $85 million capital construction project, going to be the largest collection of art in between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia when it opens in 2024. But we will be occupying that facility as staff members of the Arboretum and of the Palmer Museum in July of 2023. And so we're active in installing hardscape, in implementing an outstanding landscape design that really is conveying extremely welcoming sense. So that's the newest thing that people are going to see. From there, if you're asking, what are we currently thinking about and raising money for? We are raising funds right now for a fountain garden that we feel like can be an even greater draw from across Park Avenue. A pet project of mine is to think about how we can be more welcoming and have some form of entrance and some form of identification that is unique to Penn State that people can see from the intersection of Park and Bigler. But we're also seeing that the plantings that we're putting in are getting more and more use and more mature. The pollinator and bird garden is really only 2 years old, 6 acres. It is without peer in my estimation of what I've seen present throughout public gardens in America. I've never seen, when we talk about putting in a pollinator garden, it's really important. And most of the pollinator gardens that I see, they're pretty small. They're pretty patchy. 6 acres dedicated to looking at native bee populations, other native pollinators. Yes, there's some demonstration hives that are there for domesticated bees, research projects that different graduate students have done, and then over on the bird side, an amazing avian education resource. And we just had last night Amanda Rodwald, who is a researcher from Cornell, who is talking about sustainable production of coffee. She was our featured avian education landscape speaker, but we also have, tree walks, bird walks that are there. There's, hundreds of events and hundreds of opportunities to volunteer there. So it's not just about, what new plant am I going to go see or what new outstanding design. It's what you can go experience every day there. That's amazing. And is, again, to get back to why did you come to Penn State? It's like, why wouldn't I?
Well, it's getting to be time for us to wrap this up. We could really talk to you for hours longer, but we do have to wrap this up. And at the end of our interviews with people, one thing that we like to ask is, what is something you love to do when you're not at work?
Oh man, so many things. I would say probably when I'm not working, a lot of time you're going to find me walking with my dog. He's just turned 2 not that long ago. Yellow lab, not a show dog. We're fortunate enough in that we have some pretty good area to walk around. From the rental that we're in, we can kind of go to mixed deciduous forest, to Scotia Barrens, to some other things. So we like to go out and walk together. And yeah, that's probably the most immediate thing I would say.
I'm sure he enjoys that.
Plants.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you getting together with us and recording this podcast with us. Thank you.
Awesome.
My absolute pleasure. My best to everyone out there, and my thumbs up to all of you who practice gardening and landscaping and the trade craft, because we all have an amazing job and just have to stick together with it.
Amen.
Thanks, Casey.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks. All right. Bye.
Bye.